All right, let's dive into a story about a single, kind of quiet policy decision made in China. A choice that, and this is no exaggeration, didn't just light a fire under one of the biggest growth stories in history, but actually redrew the entire map of the global economy. It's a huge question, right? But it gets right to the heart of what we're talking about. Because, believe it or not, a single decision made decades ago has a direct line to the price of the phone in your pocket, the clothes on your back, and yeah, the whole economy you're living in right now. Okay, so let's rewind a bit. We're in the early 1990s. China's economy is just exploding. It's in the middle of this massive transformation, but it needs one thing more than anything else: stability. So, the people in charge made a really bold move. Instead of letting their currency, the yuan, just float around on the open market, they decided to anchor it. So, what they did is something called a currency peg. It sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple and super powerful. You basically lock your currency's value to another, really stable international currency. And which anchor did China choose? Well, the most stable one of them all, the good old US dollar. And here it is, the magic number. For years, the exchange rate was fixed right around 8.28 yuan to one US dollar. Now, this wasn't just some number on a screen. No, this was a promise. It was China telling the world, hey, the cost of doing business here, it's predictable, it's stable. And that, my friends, was basically a giant flashing open for business sign for foreign investment. And that simple promise of stability, it became the launchpad for an absolute economic explosion. It gave China the foundation it needed to build an export engine that was about to take the entire world by storm. I mean, this quote just nails it, doesn't it? The currency peg turned China into the factory of the world. By keeping the yuan's value predictable, Chinese goods were always, reliably, cheap for anyone buying with dollars. All of a sudden, China wasn't just a place to build stuff. It became the place. And you could see the results everywhere. I'm talking about container ships just pouring out of Chinese ports, jam-packed with everything: electronics, toys, clothes. Millions and millions of people moved from farms to factories. And the hum of those assembly lines, that basically became the soundtrack of a whole new economic era. So the peg, that lit the fuse. But then, in 2001, China joins the World Trade Organization. And that was like pouring gasoline on the fire. Boom. This move just shattered the last of the trade barriers and threw the doors to Western markets wide open. Foreign companies didn't just walk in, they rushed in, and they brought money, sure, but also state-of-the-art machinery and some seriously crucial know-how. Okay, so now China is just swimming in US dollars from all these exports, a torrent of cash. But here's where it gets really interesting. What they did with all those dollars created one of the most fascinating, kind of weird feedback loops in modern economic history. This is the cycle right here. Let me walk you through it. Step 1. China sells tons of stuff to the US and earns billions of dollars. Simple enough. Step 2. China's central bank takes all that cash and buys US Treasury bonds, basically lending money to the US government. Step 3. Because China is buying so much US debt, it helps keep American interest rates super low. And step 4? Well, what happens when interest rates are low? Americans get cheap credit for mortgages, car loans, credit cards, which allows them to, you guessed it, buy even more stuff from China. It's a wild loop. I mean, it's a pretty surreal relationship when you think about it. This quote says it all. America was buying from China on credit that China itself was helping to pay for. Let that sink in for a second. This strange symbiotic cycle was the engine that powered both economies for years and years. But wait, there's more to it. Behind the scenes of this giant export boom, something even deeper was going on. It wasn't just about assembling things anymore. It was about learning how to make them, better, smarter. Just think about it for a second. When those foreign companies came in, they didn't just bring blueprints and machines. They brought their best managers, their top engineers, their cutting-edge methods. And the Chinese workers and engineers, they were like sponges. They absorbed all of this knowledge, learning and adapting at an absolutely incredible speed. And what you get is this incredible leapfrog effect. The factory that used to make simple plastic toys, now it's pumping out sophisticated smartphones. The old textile mill is now making high-end laptops. This wasn't an accident. China was deliberately climbing up the value chain, transforming itself from just being the world's assembler into a true global innovator. But, no engine can run full throttle on the same fuel forever. By the mid-2000s, China's economy had gotten so huge, so massive, that the very currency peg that had fueled its incredible rise was now starting to cause some serious problems. You could feel it. The era of that hard peg was coming to an end. Now, this didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It started kind of quietly back in 2005, when Beijing started to let the yuan slowly get a little stronger against the dollar. But then, in 2015, they took a much bigger step. They really eased up on the peg, letting market forces have a much bigger say in what the currency was actually worth. And these moves, they were a massive signal to the rest of the world. The message was clear. The old rules of the game were changing. That era of the super cheap yuan, the fuel for that incredible first wave of growth, was officially over. And that raised a massive question. Could China keep this incredible rise going without it? And that brings us pretty much to today, because the legacy of that dollar peg wasn't just a much, much stronger Chinese economy. It was the buildup of just immense wealth and influence. And that has completely changed the pieces on the global chessboard. Those trillions of dollars that China earned, they didn't just sit in a bank account. They were converted into new tools of power. We're talking about that wealth funding huge infrastructure projects all over the world with the Belt and Road Initiative. It lets China set up currency swap lines with other countries, and it helps them push the yuan as a real alternative to the dollar for international trade. Of course, this model also created a ton of pressure around the world. For a lot of other countries, that flood of cheap Chinese goods could be devastating for local industries. And that's what led to the political backlash and the trade disputes that we're still seeing play out today. So the very engine of China's rise also created a whole lot of global friction. When you step back and look at the whole thing, China's story is just this powerful reminder that economics isn't some random force of nature, right? It's the result of specific choices made by people. A single decision to peg a currency had echoes that have lasted for decades and completely reshaped the lives of billions. So why does any of this matter to you? Well, because in this totally interconnected world we live in, every single thing you buy, every investment you make, even how you vote, it's all a thread in this giant global tapestry. We're all connected to this story, and we all have a stake in how it turns out. Look, understanding how one decision like the dollar peg could change everything helps us see the massive forces that are shaping our future right now. The real question isn't just about what happened in the past, it's about what comes next. Now that we know how the global game was played, what's the next move?